access to ownership started way back when I was young, when I was a shorty. I'm actually the equivalent of the hip hop Rich Dad, Poor Dad. See, I grew up in the rough streets of Trenton, New Jersey. And back in the day, Trenton, New Jersey was just like every other major city across the country. There was always some type of factory work that, even if you didn't go to college, fresh out of high school, you could go get a factory job and support your family and raise a family and make a decent middle class living. That was available to us. And Trenton, New Jersey was no different. In Trenton, New Jersey, we had the General Motors car plant, car factory. And my grandfather was my rich father. My grandfather was the one who worked at GM for over 30 years, 35 years or so. Worked hard at GM. But that's not what made him the rich dad. Just like every other major city across the country, good paying factory jobs were outsourced, shipped overseas. Our communities, our inner cities were void of any gainful employment for those who lived there in the inner city. But my grandfather, Frank E. Leggett Jr., I call him my rich dad because my very first impression of entrepreneurship and being in business for yourself and pulling yourself up by the bootstraps came. I was 6 years old. I remember being 6 years old and looking at his business card laying around the house. L&W Enterprises. I'll never forget. At the age of 6 years old, I saw Pop's business card, L&W Enterprises. My grandfather, he evidently took his good paying salary from General Motors. Number one, he moved our family out of the hood, out of the city, into the suburbs, bought him a nice house, bought him he kept a nice Cadillac. He was a GM worker. But even more than that, what made him my rich dad was he went out and started buying property, fixing up property, and flipping properties. So he got into real estate. All right. Unfortunately, before he could buy his hotel, like in the original Rich Dad, Poor Dad story, which ended up a huge asset for that family, for the Robert Kiyosaki family. My rich dad lost his life to cancer in the early 80s before his dream could be materialized. And so my poor dad, which is my father, Frank E. Leggett III, just like in the original Rich Dad Poor Dad story, he's highly educated.